Grace upon grace.
Good morning. Happy Wednesday.
My son. Hey there, I need a
Good morning.
Morning.
How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm good.
Good. Sorry about before. My mom was asking me some stuff.
That's okay.
We'll wait for a little bit. I guess until like 11:03.
Sure.
Yeah, and then you can get started. Do you have a
Okay.
nice weekend?
I work on well, I take Sunday off because I need to realign, and have that one day I can count on.
Yeah.
I'm working Saturdays.
Okay.
It's busy, but I love it on Friday evening when I get that last report out. I go, yes.
Yeah.
It's kind of strange because Sundays I just get like comatose or something. I'm just laying around all day.
Yeah.
Which is nice.
It's just your body trying to like recover from all the busyness.
Oh yeah. But
Yeah.
we did go to Red Top Sunday, and I love going up to the lake. That's a fun place to be. So.
Yeah, actually, I was up in Cartersville yesterday.
Oh, I'll be up there this afternoon. Actually.
Oh, okay.
Doing a home inspection. What were you in Cartersville doing?
I'm in a musical at the theater in downtown, so I went up there yesterday and the day before for rehearsal.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Live theater.
Yes.
Gosh.
Yeah.
I think the last time my niece's husband was in a play, they did the Addams Family,
Mm-hmm.
and he was in Newnan.
Okay.
So, down there.
Yeah, it's been fun. Hi Deja, hi Itzel.
Hey, how are you guys today?
Good, how are
Good.
y'all?
Doing well.
Good. We're just gonna wait for a few more minutes before we get started, just to allow more people to jump on.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now, how long do you want me to speak?
Honestly, for however long you want. Like you have the whole hour, but if you don't use up the whole hour, then that's fine.
It was just an hour?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
actually, I have a 3-hour CE that I'm putting together, but easy to condense it to, I like to do it like maybe 45 minutes and then questions.
Yeah, I think that will work.
Yeah.
That should definitely work then. I won't be able to be on the entire time, but I will be here for a little while.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is this for generally new agents or been around for a while or just?
Well, right now it looks like we have mainly newer agents on, but it is open to like the whole office. So
Yeah.
whoever else decides to pop on.
All right.
You know.
Good deal.
Yeah.
Deja, how long have you been selling real estate?
Hi, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I got my license in September, so
Yeah.
not quite a year.
How's it going for you?
I am still on the hunt, so I'm still kind of getting in the beginning. I'm in the beginning stages of building customers and clients.
We often say that starting in real estate is like my mother was in real estate for 30 years. We used to build homes. We're general contractors. And so we know that lifestyle. We know the glorious life of a real estate agent. When someone says, oh, I wanted to get a real estate because it's a flexible schedule, I laugh, go, yeah, it's flexible. You can get the opportunity to work till 10 at night. But
it's not quite that way at all. I kind of came with my eyes wide open on the fact that in order to build business, you got to put some time into it. So, and it's a steady pace. There are people out there that are immediate, and then there's people that kind of has to take time to build their business. I'm the take time to build their business kind of girl.
Sure.
Yeah.
Very nice. Often equate whether you're starting in real estate, home inspection, or whatever business, it's kind of like a plane on the runway. You start, but it's slow, and then you're building up speed, and then you get lift, and then there's never a cruising altitude. The cruising altitude would be that everything is working as it should, not cruising as you can just kind of sit back, but it's cruising and that all systems are functioning efficiently, and then you get into that cruising altitude where momentum is building, and that's a fun place to be.
I look forward to that being the case.
Yeah, definitely.
How about you? How long have you been an inspector?
On my own business for 6 years. I was inspecting with a national franchise for 2 years. So I started out 2 years with a franchise as an inspector and director of marketing. And then after 2 years, I started my own business. And I was fortunate that when I started my own business, a lot of people already had known me because I was a marketing director. And so my business, instead of a helicopter, it was like a helicopter instead of a plane. It just took off the ground. And I was grateful. I really didn't anticipate or expect that. But it's been a great 6 years. So.
Well, I think you can go ahead and get started.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, let's do that.
Well, let me introduce myself. My name is Oby Arnold. My company is Inspector RX, and I don't know who was here or didn't hear, but I grew up. My mother was. It actually changed the course of our family as a real estate agent. Not planned to do this, but this is her Phoenix Award for 25 years as $1 million producer. That's when $1 million was a lot of money back then. But she was a very good real estate agent. We used to build houses a lifetime ago, seems like. So I've been in that business for a long time. I started building houses and doing construction during school and things like that. And then when I got out, I actually got into sales. And so I have a sales career as well. I used to sell equipment for paper machines. My territory is North America, which is a lot of travel. And it can wear on you. It can wear on the family. So that business went overseas. And then I got into the commercial construction project management. And I got my what's called a PMP, project management professional for the construction. Most of the time people have IT related PMPs, but mine was in construction, is how to manage a project. So invaluable. I still have that certification, got it in 2005. And that's when I started doing commercial construction project management. But I'd gotten a label. I was labeled as a traveling project manager. So I was still on the road. And so I just decided at one point to get off the road. So I often say I don't travel anymore. That's overnight, but I drive a lot because I have a commitment to my agents. I go where they go. So I've gone from anywhere from LJ to Jasper to Dalton, because that's where my agents are. And my philosophy on that is, when you get a new inspector, there's a lot of crazy out there. When you get a new inspector, that puts a question mark in the whole process. And my goal is to take that part of the question mark out of the equation. So that's why I like to go wherever my agents go. I do have another inspector. I'm looking to hire another one, but I have one in Covington, and he's a retired firefighter, and he's very good. Customers like him, and that's the goal. I will say that we're really in the same business. You have a real estate license. I'm certified through ASHI, American Society of Home Inspectors. We're both small business people, and we're both, you sell real estate, I do home inspections, but we're both in the customer service business. I always recognize that when a customer buys a home, they're just really nervous. They're very nervous. One young lady said, because they bought a house that was way more than they had anticipated, and she said, "This is the biggest decision I'll ever make." And I said, "Are you planning to have kids?" Yeah. It's not the biggest decision. It's just buying a house. My goal is to go through the house, test the components of it, and we'll get into that. And then my goal is at the end is to give a summary and help them decide what they're buying. It's just a snapshot. You know, I always say I don't have emotion in the house. I wasn't there 3 hours ago. I won't be there 3 hours from now. But in 3 hours that I'm there, I'm just giving a snapshot of what we find. And I've spent a lot of time trying to find, I always say one thing leads to another. So if you find that one thing, if it leads to another, then that helps you locate things. But if it doesn't, that means, okay, it's just one condition. But there are no requirements to be a home inspector except to have a business license. And I have a friend of mine who I wanted to hire him. He decided to start his own business. And he's got a nice website and everything. It looks great. And he's bought all the tools and stuff, but he's never done an inspection. You know, so there's and that's okay. Everybody starts somewhere, but there's a learning curve. And I think if I hired a new inspector, I'm going to go on 40 or 50 inspections with him, really evaluating before I can just, you know, let them be on their own or send a report, because so much learning goes on during that period. I think I've probably done 2,500 inspections at this point, and or more. But you know, I have that sense that, you know, you can't say I've seen it all. You can't say that, because I saw something yesterday I'd never seen before, you know. And so it's there is a part of it. There are two parts to an inspection. There's the technical part and there's the art of it. And the technical part is, you know, looking for foundation issues, looking for settling, bracing, is it framed properly, those kind of things. That's the technical part of it. The art of it is something that's not there that should be there. And so that's what I kind of have to marry the two and say, what's something's wrong? Oh yeah, it doesn't have a handrail. Or, oh yeah, it's over, you know, 30 inches. It doesn't have guardrails, so, or fall protection or something like that. So you have to always be aware of that. So that's a little bit about it as an introduction. I think one of the first things, a good place to start, is communication and how to communicate. If sometimes you're going to be the listing agent and sometimes you'll be the buying agent. If you're a listing agent, it is, I think, always a good idea to inform the seller to do several things. One is, I know they're in transition. They usually boxes all over the place, especially in the garage or the basement. It's always a good idea to have them move boxes away from, say, the electrical panel or access to the water heater or furnace, because sometimes there's so many boxes you can't, you know, we don't, as inspectors don't like to move boxes because something can get broken or you can be accused of breaking something. I always joke about the fact that if I broke a $2 piece of glass from a garage sale, all of a sudden it becomes an irreplaceable family heirloom. You know, so I want to be careful what I move. So as far as a home inspection, the things that you should explain to your customer is things need to be readily available. You'll be able, I need to have access so I can take off the electrical panel. And things should be operated. If you've got a toilet that's turned off because maybe you never use it, it should be turned on. It should already be in operating condition. Most inspectors are not going to turn on the valve and then test it and turn it back off. Most won't do that, especially when it's in plumbing, because that can cause issues. It can cause leaks, and then you've got to have a plumber come out there and do some repair. So, so those things, you explain to the customer that everything should be ready for testing. And then second is, I would recommend, if it's like we need to look under the sink, we don't move stuff out of the way. There is a best practice that inspectors have, and that is don't touch anything in there. Just look with a flashlight to see the drain and the water supply under a sink, maybe a serial number on the disposal, but don't start moving things around, because then you can bump something and it can cause, may cause a leak, and that's happened before. So most inspectors would only look with a flashlight, and if they can't see anything, like to say you got towels packed in there, usually what they'll do is just take a picture of it. So if there is a leak or something happens in the future, they say, well, I couldn't see it. So it's always a good idea to explain to, let's take out some storage items. Let's remove towels that you don't need. Let's clear out some of the closets and the sinks underneath in the cabinets, so you can actually see what's in there, what kind of piping it has. Those are things that it would be very helpful for the customer to know. Also, it is better that the seller not be there, just because sometimes buyers get a little uncomfortable going through closets, looking through things when other people's belongings are there, and the seller is kind of following them around. It gets a little awkward. And when you want to have a conversation, my findings are confidential to the buyer. So if the seller, sometimes the seller agent, the listing agent, they'll say, well, what did you find? And I hate it when they ask that question, because I have to say, well, it's confidential to the buyer. So, and if you want to have a summary at the end, if the seller is there, you have to kind of go out in the garage or outside or something like that to have a conversation. I think it's better if you could have them be gone for the 3-hour period, and then they have, freedom to talk and discuss and look around the house. If they have animals, it's either good to have them either removed or in a cage. I know one time a guy called me, I was doing a high-rise condo, and he said, look, I wasn't able to take my dog to the kennel, and but he's a very sweet dog. That dog wanted to eat me. He wanted to eat me. And I said, no, I couldn't even inspect the room. I just said, left the door closed, because when I came around the sliding door, he looked like he wanted to get me through the door. So, it's always good if you've got animals to keep them maybe caged, things like that. Those are some of the things I think to help the process. Now, on the subject of communication, I have an office. It's actually located in Missouri, and they have quite a few home inspection companies that they answer phones for. There are 5 people on my team. It's a great team. They do a great job. There's certain things they have to know, they have to ask. So they'll say, what's the address? And when you give them the address, they type it up and they pull it up, and there it is on realtor.com or something. And it'll say how many square feet, it'll give the age, things like that. And that's information they're already putting in. So they're not asking you that, but they'll need the listing agent's information. if they don't know if you're not in the system, they'll ask you, well, what is your contact information? How do you spell your name and all that? Then you're in the system, and they'll get the customer name, and then they'll ask you some other questions. Do you want termite inspection? And we don't charge for termite inspection. Arrow does our inspections for us. They do a great job, and so that's, since it's no charge, they're going to ask you, do you want termite inspection? And if there's not especially if there's not a bond on the house already, then it's a good idea just to say, sure, if there is, you can ask if you want to. They don't mind coming out. So they're going to ask you, do you want termite inspection? They're also going to ask you, do you want radon testing? And that's a red line question they have. Radon is, I don't know if you're familiar with radon, but it is a naturally occurring gas. It comes from under the ground. It comes from decaying uranium, which is found in granite. So as it's decaying and you've got this house on top of where it's normally coming up, then it will find its way through cracks in the concrete, gaps and things like that, and finds its way inside the house. And when it's inside the house, that could be dangerous for lung cancer. It's the second leading cause of lung cancer for non-smokers. I have a friend of mine who just passed away. She was 55, never smoked a cigarette in her life, died from lung cancer. So I talked to her husband, and we're going to go over there and do a radon test. And so, radon is a real issue. It's a real thing. And we offer radon testing, of course. And that's always a good thing. I've had some agents who said, oh, you don't need it. You don't need radon testing. That's not real science. You put yourself in a real precarious position if something happens and they found out that somebody's got lung cancer, and they come back to you and say, you said it wasn't important, and now we've got these medical bills. So radon is an important thing. Just last week, I had someone who said, yeah, I don't really believe in that science. The seller said that. He's a former inspector, and the buyer said, yeah, I don't think it is either, but we're going to do it just because we've got kids. Okay, I'm glad you did it at least for that reason. And it came back high, which means that would have been, it could have had adverse effects in the future for them. So I'm really glad that they did that test. And sometimes it comes back low, and they'll say, well, that was a waste of money. Well, no, it was. For $200, for $195, now you know. And that's important. Because, I've had some people that have been in the house for 10 or 12 years, and the level was quite high. And so knowing is important. My company is always going to ask that question. That's a red line question, yes or no. And sometimes they change their mind, and that's fine. We have extra detectors that we can go ahead and do a radon test. But there have been a number of times where, they said, we're not, okay, we'll do it. And it's high. And that's a really good thing I like that, being able to, I'd feel bad if I knew the level was high and they didn't want to do anything, or homes in that area were high and they didn't want to do it. And I can't force them to. But they were asked, and so we go from there. So we talked about good communication, because when my company asks these questions about the buyer, the address, additional services, we do mold testing and things like that. The reason why they ask that question is because there will be a series of automatic emails that go out. There will be emails that are sent to the listing agent saying, hey, there's an inspection planned at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, Friday morning, Saturday morning, whatever. To alert them, and then they will contact their seller. The buyer agent and the buyer both get notifications that an inspection is going to happen. And the buyer also gets the option to pay by credit card. They have a chance to look at the pre-inspection agreement. They can do all of that beforehand, and they can pay for it online. So that's why it's important to be able to get this information out. And because we want to make sure that they're able to look at the contract, read it, understand it. If they have any questions, they can call or discuss it actually at the inspection, and that's fine. So anyway, that's kind of the introduction as far as communication. Is the listing agent. The listing agent is always good to let them, make sure they know when it's going to happen. They can communicate those issues, those things to the seller, like maybe you should go somewhere else, find a place for 3 hours. Sometimes that's not possible. That's okay. I can work around that. But it's best if maybe they're not there, and give them free rein. So and then moving storage items out. So that's an important thing to do. And then, like I said, the other communication is we send out information to everybody. So what is included in a home inspection? Well, let's start from the top and we'll go down to the bottom. When I'm going into an attic, I'm looking at the framing. Is it properly braced? That's one of the things I'm looking for. Is there any obvious signs of leaking coming through, from the roof? Now I've looked at the roof. What kind of venting does it have? Does it have gables, ridge vents, and soffit vents? So it should have high and low venting. So I'm looking for that, because if it's not well ventilated, then it's going to prematurely damage. The shingles will not last as long. So I think when we're looking at the roof, I'm looking at the chimney. I'm making sure that there's no damage, and that I'm looking at the roof in total and see how does the water flow off of the roof and toward the house. Does it go up against a wall, or does it go freely into the gutter? Do they have the right flashing? Things like that. Then on the inside, as I mentioned, I'm looking for, are there gaps where rodents can get in? Are there trails, rodent trails in the insulation, which is important. I'm looking for, how much is it adequate insulation? All of those things, make up the structure of the attic. Let's skip down and go down to the bottom. In the basement, we're looking for signs of cracking and things like that. So the two most common types of foundations, if it's basement, the two most common are masonry block walls and poured concrete walls. Now, I used to build these concrete, well, I've built both, but the concrete walls, you pour the concrete footings, and you have rebar sticking out, 1/2-inch rebar, steel rods iron rods coming out of the footings. They're secured in there, and you bend them, you tie them off, and you create this iron, looks like a skeleton kind of thing. Then you put these large panels on each side, you lock them in place, and then you pour concrete in them, remove the panels, and then you've got this concrete wall with iron framing, and it actually is iron rebar is what that's called. The other type is a masonry block wall. The difference between the two is masonry block walls tend to be more porous, and you're hoping that it has good weather proofing on the other side. Both systems should use it like a spray tar, where you spray it on there to prevent water from coming in. But one of the more common things I see with masonry block walls is I see cracking. And if I see this long horizontal crack, that tells me there's pressure against the wall. And if there's pressure against the wall, it's causing it to actually bow out. there's pressure against it and it wants to bow out, then I should do it like that. Then that's a structural issue that needs to be resolved. You generally don't find that with the poured concrete walls because they're just a lot more sturdy. So whenever you see that, that's a good sign. And they can have cracking in them too, but there's usually stress cracks. So you're looking at the roof and the foundation. There are two types. I'm looking for water intrusion, especially if it's been finished. It's beautiful walls, nice ceilings. I'll use my thermal imaging camera if it's below grade to make sure that there's no hidden leaks. Now, it is a visual inspection, but if I can see a little bit beyond, a little further, something that, sometimes I'll put a fresh coat of paint on it, everything looks good, but the moisture meter and the thermal imaging camera may show something different. So I'm looking for those kind of things. Now, if it's a concrete slab, just a ranch, then when I'm walking on the floor, I'm trying to sense if I feel any highs or any highs or not lows, but highs. That would mean that there's a crack in the concrete and it's pushing up, and you might see it in a wood floor where one piece of wood is higher than the other. That's because it's being pushed up. Now, if there's some carpet, I'm trying to sense, does it feel like it's moving? I mean, do I feel like I'm going downhill? That would tell me that there's some settling. Without being able to actually see what's under there, I can get a sense of that. I did a house a couple of months ago. It was a large house, and I was in the front, and I felt the slope going down toward the back of the house. And I have a laser measure, put it on the floor, and measured 7 inches from the front to the back, 7-inch drop. So those are the things we look for as far as structure. So now I've gone through when I do a summary, I like to go through the big four: roof, AC, water heater, furnace. The roof we've discussed. I'm going to give the age and the general condition. I might call it fair because of its age, no signs of leaking, or it may be satisfactory, or it could be poor. I did one the other day. It was poor. It had met its design life, needed to be replaced. So now we're looking at from the roof, and then the water heater is a different. Now that's something I like to explain to the customer because they generally don't know about it. But let's say if we have a water heater that's 10 years old, I'm going to say it's past its design life at that point because it gets unpredictable when it can go out. I would guarantee that it has some amount of sediment, sediment in the bottom of the tank. And over time, it tends to rust out. And then when a water heater goes bad, it starts leaking. And if it's a 50-gallon tank, you turn off the water, it's going to leak 50 gallons. But I always like to show them how to turn water off to the water heater. But you have electric and you have gas. Both of them are good. But now when it's 10 years old, that doesn't mean you have to go replace it. It means you should monitor it. They can last 15 or 20 years, but a lot of them start they start getting age at 10 years. So that's when I'll start doing that. But I'll let them know you can replace it if you want to. You don't necessarily have to. It could last a year, it could go out in 6 months or a month. It's hard to predict that, but then it could last 5 years. Unfortunately, there's no good way to gauge how long a water heater is going to last. Furnace.
Can I ask one question really quickly?
Is there a question?
Yeah, I just want to know what those 4 things again. The roof, AC. I just didn't hear them all.
I'm sorry, say that again.
You mentioned like the 4 things that you look for. We talked about roof, AC. I just didn't know what all the 4 things were.
Oh, yeah, roof, AC, water heater, and furnace. So I did the roof and the water heater. Now let's talk about HVAC, the heating and air. I'm going to look at the age. If it's today where it's warm enough, over 65 degrees, I'm going to test the cooling. I'm going to be able to determine if it's working in a normal operating range. I'll be able to tell if it's if this refrigerant is adequate or not. One thing we don't do in a home inspection is determine, is this sized correctly for the house? Because those are load calculations that an HVAC technician would do. But we're looking at, is it working in operational range? Are there supply and return vents in the right place? The age of the unit, the top, is it a heat pump or is it air compressor? We'll give the age, the manufacturer. Those are the things that we report on as much as we can without having a license. The next thing we do is, and we'll go to the furnace. If it's a furnace, means it's gas. It's got a gas line coming to it. And I'm looking for rust where that fire goes into the box, because behind that, where that fire goes into the box, behind that is the heart of the furnace system, further than I can go, because I'm not a technician or a licensed technician. But that is, it's called a heat exchanger. It's a two-piece welded serpentine design welded together. Over time, let's say if it's 15 or 20 years old, it's possible it could have cracks in it. If it did, it could release carbon monoxide. So I'm always looking for, what's the age of the furnace unit? Do I see service records? If I don't, I'm going to say rated fair due to age and absence of service records. I recommend evaluating the heat pump of the heat exchanger to ensure that it's in good operating condition. And like I said, looking for rust, things like that. That's the furnace. The other type is called a heat pump. And heat pumps, it's all electric. So it has some different components, but there's not much to see in there because it's electric. We do test them. We test the AC, but if it's actually over 65, we're not supposed to test the heating portion of it. But most of the time we can. Most of the time we are able to test both heating and cooling. And I don't ever like to say unable to test because of this or that. Sometimes you have to, but for the most part, if I can, I'm going to test it. Most inspectors are not going to turn on a pilot light, let's say to light a fireplace or a water heater, but I'm going to. I'll turn it on, and if it works, I'll turn it back off. I always leave it at the same condition that I found it. So I do like to at least test it and see if it's working. And then, like I said, I'll leave it in the condition that I found it. So that's the roof, AC, water heater, furnace. Now, the thing I do is I'll look at the electrical panel. I'll open the panel and make sure that everything is in safe condition. Sometimes you find unsafe conditions where they put too many wires in the, it's called the lug strip, or they've doubled up wires in places where it should only be a single wire. Circuit breakers are designed to trip based on heat. So if the hot and the neutral wire, if there's resistance and it starts getting hot, the breaker trips rather than keeping on and then causing a fire. Back in the old days, they used to have a fuse. Then that fuse would pop. And you just had to get a new fuse, put it in there. But today it's a circuit breaker. You don't have to go buy another fuse. You just reset the breaker. So, but we're looking for, I'm not looking to bring it up to code because the seller is not required to bring it up to code. I am looking for making sure it's safe. So now another thing that I do is, so we've tested the roof, AC, water heater, furnace, which means we've looked at the structure of the house and the main mechanicals, which would be the water heater, furnace, air conditioner, and the electrical. The next thing is plumbing. And that's the major cause of issues with home inspectors. You run the water, when I call it aggressively, because I'm testing to make sure that showers are not leaking, faucets are not leaking, that sometimes the drain might be leaking or the supply even. So I'm looking to make sure that everything is working in order the way it should be. And when you do that, sometimes it's possible that there could be a leak in the bottom, below the cabinet, where it comes up through the wall before it gets to the cabinet, which is where I can see it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to see it if it's below. So I'm looking for anything that would indicate a leak. And at the very end of the inspection, I'm looking at the ceilings to see if anything looks out of the ordinary, maybe spots that I didn't see at the beginning. And then I use a thermal imaging camera at the top to make sure. Now that will tell me if there is a leak or not. So I'll use it on the ceilings, but I also use it, like I said, below grade to make sure that there are no signs of leaking that might be covered up or hidden. So that's kind of one of the things I'm looking for as far as plumbing is concerned. I'm testing the outside faucets, inside faucets. So those are the main parts of the house. And then at the end, I'll do a summary with the customer. I'll show them how to replace the air filter. I'll show them how to turn off water to the water heater, explain a few things about that, how to turn off water to the inside of the house if they ever had to turn off that water. And I have a picture of that in the report. So those are some of the things I'll do, and I'll go through. Now that's where there's a lot of difference between home inspectors. Now I've been with Hvac now for 8 years, actually. And I've learned that there are a lot of inspectors that are alarmists, and they'll comment on the quality of construction, even though it's not defective. They'll say, this is terrible. You're not supposed to say that. I keep my emotions out of it. I always say, we don't alarm, we just inform. This is what it is. I don't make judgments on, a good example. I did a house where the siding was horrible. And in fact, it was so bad on all sides, I just called it poor. And I was ready to tell them, well, your siding should be replaced. But I didn't get a chance to say that because when the guy pulled up on his tag, it said Nelson siding. So he knew, so I don't need to make those judgments. He knows that. And, or he may have relatives oh yeah, my dad's an electrician, that kind of thing. So I just explain the facts the way they are and then let them decide what's important. And like I said, keeping the emotions out. And the last thing I'll discuss, and then we can questions, is the report itself. There's a lot of new software out there that can give you all kinds of different, and I was looking at maybe changing, because my reports, they're simple. But they're getting kind of fancy now, and I'm looking at them thinking, that's hard to understand. And I was going to change, but one of my agents that has been with me from the very beginning, she said, please don't change to this particular one. She said, I love your reports. They're very simple to understand. So I decided just to keep it that way. It's simple, it's easy to understand. But what I do, there's two sections of the report. There's an upper section, and then there's the lower section. Upper section is a list of items, and the only things that are going to be up there are expensive to repair, safety, and structural. Those are going to be up in the upper section. What I'm trying to do is highlight the difference between those things that are really important and those things that are not. Now, in the lower section, it's going to have other things like if a door doesn't latch because the striker plate, something a handyman would do, that's going to be in the lower section. So now I've kind of differentiated, because even some things are simply recommendations. So, the things where you're going to get your amendments from will be, for the most part, in that upper section. I always say you can ask for any and everything, but I like to break it out so you can see these are the bigger items, and they could be important, but they're something that generally a handyman would do. So, this is a good time for questions. If you've got any questions, I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
I have a question.
Sure.
So you mentioned that you only checked the furnace to see if it was safe, but not up to code. Why would you not check for it to be up to code?
Well, let me kind of back up. What I meant to say. Thank you for helping me clarify that. I'm looking at a lot of things about the when I say up to code. When a furnace is installed, it's a gas furnace. It might be 20 years old. It may have been up to code at the time, but now it may be defective. If it's old, that's okay. But if it's old and it's rusted and the vents are not done properly, where there's supposed to be a 1/4 inch per foot rise, if I see rust on that, that tells me a lot about what's going on inside as well. So I'm looking at venting, the type of gas that's going in, what the flame looks like, rust in the burner, things like that. So that's about all we can do without going inside the unit, which is something a home inspector would not do because they're not licensed HVAC people. But like I said, the things that we're looking for are proper venting, proper flame. It should be a blue flame. If there's yellow, that's an indication that there's rust. If I see rust, that's going to be put on the report. And I'm going to rate it based on its age. If it's 12 years old, the design life is 10 to 12. And I'll tell people if it's 12 years old, that doesn't mean you have to go replace it. It doesn't mean you need to maintain it on a regular basis as a
Okay.
good practice.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, I have another quick question. So if the heat exchange does need any sort of maintenance, who would the buyer, I guess, if they do go ahead and buy the house, who would they contact for that?
They would need to get a licensed heating and air conditioning contractor.
Okay,
And emphasis on the licensed.
gotcha.
So, RS Andrews or Reliable or Cool Ray or somebody like that. They can come in and take it apart. And in fact, I'm glad you asked that question too, because for a technician to inspect the heat exchanger is a simple process. It's a little camera that they can scope it and see if there's any issues they can see if there's any cracks or not, just by scoping it without having to go all the way into it.
Okay, cool. All right, well, thank you. Those are all of my questions and you answered them, so thank you.
You're welcome.
I had a
I
question
have a question.
for Radon.
Oh, go ahead.
What now?
Daisha, you can go ahead.
Okay, the priorities that you said you put on your report,
Mhm.
do you help them understand what those costs could potentially be so they can prioritize what that looks like, or is that something that they have to investigate on their own?
Well, if they ask for, if they say, what's the general cost of that? I can go through that. But I don't generally have a list that I give them. Some people call that repair costs. The reason is because there's always a disclaimer that it's, not responsible, not liable for, it's a good guess. And if they're really interested in that, like, how much does it cost to replace a windowsill? I'll say generally $200. Generally. So I'll be happy to go through, anytime they ask me, specifically, I'll give them, I had that happen the other day. I said, that's $2,500 to $3,500 is what I would imagine.
Okay. The reason I'm asking, because I was a client yesterday and they looked at a house and they were concerned about the foundation, and they just they saw some cracks in the cedar block type foundation. So they were concerned and they really didn't want to have to worry about that. So they kind of walked away from it as an opportunity of a house. So I was just wondering, like, at what point do you say maybe we should proceed and take a look at that as what the cost would be versus walking away from it 100%? Because I think you were
Sure.
talking about the whole foundation. I think people do have concern about that, especially on an older home.
Very good question. I'm glad you asked that question because I've had two situations recently. One, he walked away from it. It was a masonry block wall, had pressure against the wall. It was actually bowing. I put a level on there, and you could see where it was not level. But he walked away from it. I would not have done that. I guess because I know construction. I would have brought in a foundation person, and they would have probably put some helical piers through it. Might be $3,000. I don't know, maybe not that much. Or they may have. See, here's the thing: as home inspectors, we don't want to get into this is how you should repair it, because there are experts out there who would probably know more than we would how to repair what needs to be done. But I could tell you, oh, well, here's something you can use: Kevlar bands. You can use helical piers, or push the wall and structure like with 4x4s or something like that. So those are kind of things that it would be better to have the other person explain how it should be done. We're in the business of recommending, finding it, pointing it out, and recommending, but not always how you're supposed to do it, because that could lead. Now, having said that, I found another one. I did another one Saturday where it was a 5-foot high masonry block wall. There was a horizontal crack all the way on the very top block. Horizontal cracks usually mean pressure against it. But in this case, there was a concrete slab poured on top of it, and it wasn't bowing. Or you can see stair-step cracking, but it wasn't moving in or out. So that was typical settling, especially if a house is 50 years old. That's kind of a common thing to see. I recommend sealing it, but if it's not moving, it just moved this way some. It could have been at the beginning. It could have been 20 years ago. So that doesn't always mean that there's an issue or problem, but I always like to recommend. I've done great work with people that I've succeeded with. Roof It Forward is a great company. Foundation Works is a good company. And then, I like to refer 180 Solutions, and I think they're vendor partners with K1. So those are people I like to be able to refer.
I had a question about the radon testing.
Sure.
Is that for older homes?
Good question. I'm glad you brought that up. No, it's for any home. And the reason why is sometimes there's somebody going around, must be someone going around saying, oh, it's a basement, it doesn't matter. Yeah, it does, because if something's coming up out of the ground and you put something on top of it, usually there's some gaps or cracks. This is a gas. So if it can find its way up there, whatever's on top of it. And so it doesn't matter whether it's a slab, a basement, even a crawl space. I'm sorry, I think I got off of what your question was, but talk about a new house. You could still have, they're not doing anything today, to seal the concrete to where, radon could not come up at that point. So if they were putting some kind of barriers, now there are some out there, but few people are doing that. There are these little barriers that kind of trap the radon and send it out. They're little, kind of like, I don't want to say a balloon because that gives the wrong view of it, but there are some things, but most people are not doing that right now. So it's possible that gas could come up, whether it's 50 years old or 5 days old. That's just the nature of gas. Speaking of radon, if when people say, oh, there have been people who said, well, I'm not buying that house because it's got radon. And I thought, well, there's a remediation for it. And they said, would you buy a house that has radon? I said, absolutely. If it had remediation. In fact, when I go in and I see a house that has had remediation, that makes me feel good. I know they know what it is and it's being taken care of. What they do is they'll go into the basement area. They'll dig a 4-inch hole into the ground, through the concrete into the ground, and they'll put a 4-inch PVC pipe in there, then seal it. And then they'll run that pipe usually in a chase that goes all the way up to the attic, through the roof. But in the attic area, they'll put an inline fan that runs 24/7 for 10 years. And what happens is that fan's always running. And what it's doing is it's pulling air, it's creating negative pressure and pulling all that air that's underneath the house through the gravel and stuff like that. It's pulling it into that tube and going out. So now whatever's out there, it's being sucked out. And it's like having a fan or something like that. It is a fan. And so that reduces the level. And I think that's a great idea. And there are other ways of doing it, usually $1,500 to $2,500. And I would say that when I find radon, now that the seller knows, if the guy walked away and said, I don't want it, well, the seller is probably going to have to remediate anyway, because then he's got to disclose now that he knows, he has to disclose that there's a high level of radon. So usually what happens is they say, okay, the level was high, it's 4 and above. And I'll be doing a CE class on that as soon as I can get this one out of the way. But if it's too high, normally the seller will take care of it and remediate it, because you've got the same problem's going to happen in the future unless they don't test for radon. So they might as well go ahead and get it repaired, remediated, and it's very effective.
What are your thoughts on homes built on slabs that have the plumbing going through the slab?
Yeah, that's common. That's fine. Today, what I like today is I'm a very traditional builder. When I was building, there was a new product that came out called polybutylene, and that turned out to be a defective product. And even copper today is pitting a lot in this area because of the chemicals that are probably in the water. But today they use what's called Hvac. It's a very good product, and I would be happy to have that underneath covered up, in concrete. But no, that's not usually an issue unless it, for some reason, broke inside or pitted inside. Well, then you have to, punch out the concrete, do the repair, and usually a floor repair. But that's common with the slab, is to have it buried underneath in the concrete.
Okay.
How much is an inspection typically?
It varies. Home inspectors are going to do it based on square footage and the age of the house. And yeah, I've had some people said, well, this house was built in 1964, but it's been totally renovated. And I said, yeah, but I have learned to not get impressed with new remodeling, because there's a certain amount of money they're going to put into it, and that's all. And it might look pretty on the living area, but when you go down below, mechanicals, that can tell another story. So I'm not saying that's the case all the time, but no, there's usually, to answer your question, it's based on square footage and age.
Okay.
Well, I've enjoyed our time together. I'm hoping that, let me say this, and let's see. Okay, I got 2 minutes. The question of should you as a buyer agent be there or not be there? And that's completely up to you. I was with an agent, he's always there before I get there. And I get there early. And but he's always there. And I said, you're always at the inspection. He said, I learn things. Every time I learn things. And I thought, okay. There's some people I've heard that say, well, it's a liability. And I'm not sure which way the teaching goes, but it's completely up to you. But I was going to say, if you're be the kind that, see, you might not be able to be there all the time, especially if you're at a closing. I call that payday. And then if that's the case, then I would say you can always call me, and I will always explain any questions you have. You know, if something's not clear, I'll make it clear.
Well, thank you for your time, Oby. We really appreciate you.
Oh, thank you. I love. What now? I'm sorry. Okay.
Okay.
I thought I heard someone say something. I wasn't sure if it was another question or not.
I thought I heard something too, but yes, your contact information.
I need to check and see if it's in the office, but I can give it to you. I can give you my cell phone number and my office number. Cell phone is 770-329-4424. My office number, if you want to schedule an inspection, is 770-633-3006. And I'll say that this is, to me, this is a partnership. And if you've got questions, even if it's another inspection company, or, you know, if you're the listing agent and this inspector had a comment or something, then if you want to ask me, I'll be happy to answer any questions you have there too.
Thank you so much, Oby.
You're welcome. Thanks, guys. Have a great afternoon.
Yeah, y'all, you guys have a fantastic day.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much.
Thank you
Sure.
so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.